How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf. Daf 100. Oh, that's funny. We're studying Daf Kuf, and on Daf Kuf Amud Beis, it mentions a kof, a monkey. Anyways, we are studying Daf Kuf of Masechta Menachos. Big milestone in Masechta Menachos. As I've said before, for me personally, it feels like very often once you get to 100, you're on the final mile. And here we go. Just another 10 daf left in Masechta Menachos. What a massive achievement, friends. Also, it's a beautiful daf. Today, we finished the 11th parak of Masechta Menachos today, which means tomorrow we begin the 12th and second to last parak of Masechta Menachos. On today's daf, the first section is a very what's the right word? It's a relatively well-known, very I don't know if fascinating is the right word, but that kind of a thing, fascinating-ish Gemara. We basically apply the concept that we learned yesterday about Talmud, because the pasuk says, "V'nasata ala shulchan lechem panim lefonai Talmud," that the lechem hapanim needs to be on the shulchan Talmud always. So the Tanakama yesterday that we saw in the Mishnah had said that, well, because we want to be makbid on making sure that there's always lechem hapanim on the shulchan, what you're going to do is you'll have two kohanim, for one per each stack respectively, pulling out the bread, while you have other two kohanim on the other side pushing new bread in, so that there is never a second without bread, without showbreads on the shulchan. Rabbi Yossi had disagreed and said, even if you remove the breads in the morning and then there's no breads on the table all day, and then in the afternoon you put the new breads there, that's also Talmud, as long as by the nighttime it's been replenished. Even though during the whole day the shulchan was empty, it's still considered Talmud. The Gemara discusses what nafkaminas are there for limud atera. V'agisa b'yomam v'leila. What does that mean? Lo yamush sefer Torah zemipicha. So what does the definition of Talmud in the context of lechem hapanim? What implications does that have for the mitzvah of limud Torah? Very fascinating-ish discussion in the Gemara, which, by the way, reminds me, yesterday I had committed to getting back to about the marble versus silver shulchan in the ulam. After looking at this further, I think I can say that the shulchan in the ulam was marble, and the reason why it was called silver, because marble is white and can be similar to silver, but it was a marble. But it was a marble shulchan. I'm going to go with that. Okay, so the first section of today's daf is Vagisabo, an explanation of Vagisabo Yomam Valayla. Next section is also interesting, gets a little bit more technical. Klei mikadesh shelo bizmano. Let's say you take a kometz of a korban mincha and you place it into a klei, but you do that at night. You're not supposed to. Right, nighttime is not the time for offering menachos. The daytime is the time for offering menachos. So what happens? Is the klei going to be mikadesh that kometz when kometz at night? That is the discussion of the second section of today's daf. And the third section, when to bake the shtei halechem and lechem hapanim. The shtei halechem for Shavuos, the lechem hapanim for every Shabbos. When are they baked, friends? And then, of course, we will wrap up with that. That will get us to the end of the 11th parak of Masechta Menachos, friends. Let us hop in and study the very exciting daf of Daf Kuf of Masechta Menachos. Friends, we shall begin on Daf Tzadi Tes, Daf Non, Daf Tzadi Tes Amud Beis of Masechta Menachos. By the way, it is Yom HaZikaron here in Eretz Yisrael, so let's have in mind all of the heroes who sacrificed their lives for us to be able to live in Eretz Yisrael. Friends, okay, we are on the Tzadites Amud Beis of Masechta Menachos. We're going to start at the Gemara about 4 or 5 lines before it starts getting wide. That's where the Gemara begins. That's where we begin. As I mentioned in the introduction, there was a machlokes in the Mishnah when it comes to the showbreads, where it says lechem panim lefanai tamid, that the showbreads need to always be on the shulchan. What is the definition of tamid? The Talmud Kama said literally there must always be bread on the shulchan, whereas Rabbi Yossi said as long as there's bread on the shulchan at some point in the morning and some point in the afternoon, that is sufficient. Now, says the Gemara, Tanya, we're learning by Rabbi Yossi. Says Rabbi Yossi, afilu silek es hayishona shachris, even if you remove the last week's breads in the morning, and then in the evening you put in the new stacks of bread, that is fine. There won't be any issue of, well, what about tamid? That's tamid. So how do I define tamid then? It means that you shouldn't go overnight without any lechem hapanim in the shulchan. So long as comes nightfall and there are lechem hapanim on the shulchan, that's fine. Even if during the course of the day there weren't, but there was in the morning, there was at night, that is sufficient. So let us therefore now extrapolate from the shita of Rabbi Yossi that that even if a person only learned a shtickle in the morning and a shtickle in the evening, lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha. So with that, right? If we're saying, if Rabbi Yossi is defining tamid as a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening, so when the pasuk says lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha, that you got to always be studying the Holy Torah, well, always can be defined as a little bit in the morning, a little bit at night. That's sufficient. Rabbi Yechanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, Rabbi Yechanan mishum ben Yochai afilu lo kara adam ela kriyas shema shachris va'arvis. Even if a person, right, is mitzvah kriyas shema midaraisa, we say kriyas shema in the morning, we say kriyas shema at night. With that, you can, technically speaking, be yotzei Kiyem lo yamush, you mekayim the pasuk of lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha. V'davar zeh also lo b'fnei am haaretz. However, either Rabbi Yochanan or Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai adds a caveat, which is keep this hush hush. You can't tell this to Ami haaretz, because if the wrong people find out about this, then they're going to say, "Oh, really? All I need to do is say Kriyas Shema in the morning at night? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to subscribe to that, lo yamush, and then I'm going to go off, and for my entire life, I will just say Kriyas Shema in the morning, Kriyas Shema at the night, Yotzezan." Rava takes the opposite approach. For Rava, Amar mitzvah lo amar b'fnei am haaretz. Rava takes the opposite approach. No, spread this message. Make bumper stickers. Spread the message far and wide. How come? So Rashi gives two kind of similar psychological tricks or whatever. One is that, that pasuk says, lo yamush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha v'hagisa b'yomim v'layla l'man tishmor lasos k'chol ha'kosuv bo ki oz tatzliach es drachecha v'oz taskil. It says if you learn Torah all the time, oz tatzliach b'drachecha v'oz taskil, you're going to be successful. But still, to be successful, it's a big investment. Yomam v'layla, okay, that's a lot. But when a person hears, look, you could be mekayim the pasuk of lo yamush sefer Torah hazeh mipicha with Kriyas Shema in the morning, Kriyas Shema in the afternoon, and that's the baseline for oz tatzliach b'chol drachecha. Oz tatzliach es drachecha. He'll say, wow, maybe I'll learn a little bit more. If I can get the success with just that, what would happen if I learn a little bit more? Maybe I'll get even more success. So therefore, Rava says, let people know this, that, really all you need to do is just a little bit, and maybe that will be inspirational for them to do a little bit more. right? You start with a little bit. The other way to look at it is that if he said, maybe a person could say, wow, technically speaking, all these people who are learning the Daf Yomi with Babble and Talmud every single day for already 6.5 years or whatever it is, they don't need to do it. All they really need to do is say Kriya Shema in the morning and the afternoon. And yet they do it. Wow, that is inspiration. And they go and they see these big inspirational people. And they say, look at how much all these people are learning. They don't have to be learning this much. All they need to do is say Kriya Shema in the morning and in the evening. And yet, there must be something to this Torah thing that people are doing more than they need to be doing, and that will inspire them to push themselves to learn more. So, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai say that even though technically all you need to do is read Kriya Shema in the morning and afternoon, we don't want for the wrong people to find out about this, because they're concerned that those people will only read Kriya Shema in the morning and the afternoon. Rava takes the opposite approach, which is that will actually serve as become an inspiration for them to push themselves to say, you know what? If all I need to do is that, I could even do a little bit more. And be inspired to do more. Shaul ben Dama ben Achoises Rabbi Shmuel. Ben Dama, the nephew of Rabbi Shmuel, asked as Rabbi Shmuel, Kigoin ani shalamanti kol hatera kula. I have already learned all of the Torah. Ma'alimon chachmei Yavanis, can I now go and learn Greek wisdom? Kara olav amikra hazeh, and Rabbi Shmuel read about the following. He said, well, what about this pasuk? Lo yomush sefer hatera hazeh mipicho, that the sefer Torah should not leave your mouth. Ve'hagisa bo yomam v'loylo, and you shall ve'hagisa bo yomam v'loylo. Let's get back to that in a second. Say uvdok she'ena lo min hayom v'lo min halayla. Go and find some time that's right. Say, well, because the Torah is v'hagisa bo yomam v'loylo, all day, all night. You got to be studying Torah. Well, if you can find the time, that's not day, not night. So okay, beseder, you can learn ulubod ba chachmas Yavanis, and you can go study chachmas Yavanis then. But obviously, Reb Yishmael, from his perspective, understands this pasuk to mean you have to be studying all of the time, and there is no time that is neither day and neither night, and therefore, in practice, you can't be studying chachmas Yavanis because there isn't actually any time that is neither day nor night. Toisvis Dafka was on Daf Samach Beis, I think. Toisvis Taka, no, not Samach Beis. Samach Gimel, Samach Aleph, nothing. Where was that Toisvis? I don't know. I can't find it now. But where was that? I don't know. Where is it? Was Samach Hed? Oh, there it is. Samach Dalet. Toisvis and Samach Dalet, Taka points out that then, if that's the case, then in principle, if you hold that v'hagisa bo yom v'layla, you can be mekayem just a little bit in the morning and the afternoon. So maybe then you can learn chachmas Yavanis. So Tosfos says over there, if you have a need to be studying these things, so then you can. What does Tosfos say? Hanu eicha de'ikat tzorech. If you need to, so you could study other things. Anyways, it's a separate sugya, but just touching it. There's a very interesting on YouTube you could find. There's a very interesting, I don't know if you can call it speech or something by Rav Soloveitchik, by Rav Yosher Ber Soloveitchik, about where he describes v'hagisa bo yom v'layla and how it's about v'hagisa bo. It's not just about learn it day and night. It's about having a relationship with it, having passion for learning, having love for learning, and maybe you could say that's what Rabbi Yishmael was saying to his nephew. His nephew what's he saying? He's saying, well, I already learned all of the Torah. Maybe I can go and learn chachmas Yavanis now. And maybe what Rabbi Yishmael was saying, that right, we didn't see v'hagisa bo yom v'layla until he was approached with this question, right? And he says, v'hagisa bo yom v'layla. Where's the passion? Where's the love? Anyways, yeah, maybe I'll link to that clip. It's like a 10-minute clip. It's yeah, check it out if you're interested. Okay. Ufliga de Reb Shmuel ben Achmani. Now, this understanding of Lo Yamush Sefer Atorah Zeh Mipicha as a reference to a chiyuv to learn all day and all night, this argues with Shmuel ben Achmani, Reb Shmuel ben Achmani, Reb Yonason, Pasuk Zeh, Eino lo chova v'lo mitzvah. Says of Shmuel ben Achmani that v'agisa b'yom v'layla is not a chiyuv. It's not a mitzvah. Ela bracha. Rather, it's a blessing. Ra HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Yoshua. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rebbeinu Shalom saw that Yoshua shedivrei Torah chavivim olav b'yoser. That Yoshua loved. He had a passion for divrei Torah. Shneimar, as the Pasuk says, M'sharsa Yoshua benun nai lo yamush mitoch ha'ol. That Yoshua would never leave the Beis HaMedrash. He was always learning. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Yoshua, Yoshua, kol kach chavivin olecha divrei Torah. You so much love divrei Torah lo yamush. Sefer Torah zemipicha. Rashi says that the Rebbeinu Shalom blessed Yoshua that he shouldn't forget any of his learning. Tanya the Rabbi Shmuel was talking to this message. Rabbi Shmuel divrei Torah lo yuhu alecha chova. They should not be upon you as a obligation. V'yatarasha liftor atzmecha mehen. You can't be you can't make yourself potter. Why do we define potter? Dismissed from them. Yotzezan. Rashi explains this to mean that you don't view limud Torah as a chova, as a debt, right? A person has a debt that they have to pay off. He's like, all right, let me just make myself potter. Let me just pay it off and be potter, be done with it, be dismissed. I get it out of my life. I have this thing I need to do. Let me just get it over with. No, first of all, they should not be, all right, lo yuhu alecha chova. That's not the right perspective. That you shouldn't view divrei Torah as a debt that you have to pay. Like, okay, I'm fine. All right, let me just listen to Babble on Talmud at quadruple speed and get it over with. And because the point is also, even if that was your perspective, at the end of the day, that's not the way it works anyways, because it's not the kind of thing that you make yourself potter of anyways. So it's not like you could just be like, okay, I'll just learn now and get it over with and be potter, because Torah is not the kind of thing you make yourself potter from. Tosfos has two other very interesting approaches, which one is that the Torah, it's not a chova. It shouldn't be a chova in that a person feels like he can't do anything else other than learn. He has to learn all the time. Rather, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Yofet Talmud Torah im derech eretz. That learning, right? It's good to have a balance. I don't usually like the word balance. I'm not such a balanced person, but there are other words that could be described this that I agree more, that are more agreeable to me. A combination of learning and also working and panasa and kind of having kind of a full picture, right? To have work and to have learning. Another Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, in ein kamach ein Torah. So Tosfos says also, right, Torah shouldn't be a chova, an obligation that I have to only be learning Torah and I can't be working, I can't be doing other things and pursuing other things. Rather, Yofeh Talmud Torah im derech eretz. And he gives another pshat as well, which is another Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, Lo lechem locha ligmor v'lo yata ben chorin libata mimenu. That there could be a feeling of being overwhelmed by the Torah. There's so much that I need to learn. I need to learn every last word of every last sefer. Every single year and every single day there's more and more svarim. And how am I supposed to learn all this stuff? Lo alechem locha ligmar. Look. It's not expected of you to do everything and to learn every last word of Torah. But at the same time, then a person could say, oh wow, thanks for letting me know. Great. Done with not learning Torah anymore. At the same time, that you also, that's not to be ignored. It's meant to be taken seriously, but not overwhelmingly. Learn. I looked at the Mishnah in the Kahati. He quoted a medrash that says it's like, I think it was a medrash from Shir Hashirim, that it's like water that drips. That a little bit at a time, it drips a little bit at a time, and it adds up. Learn a little bit of a day, right? Daf Yomi, one daf a day. Over time, we're 6.5 years in, we're almost learning all of Shas. Can you imagine? So a little bit every day. So right. So lo lechem locha more. You don't have to drive yourself nuts and be paralyzed and overwhelmed. But at the same time, be committed consistently, and that way, you and I and we all will cover quite a lot. Very, very interesting discussions over here about limud haTorah. Chizkiah says, what does the pasuk say in Iyov? V'af asischo mipitzar, that the Rabbanah Shalom diverts you, pulls you away from the straight. What's a straight? Is that like a narrow thing, like a narrow opening? Rachav lamutzak tachtel, to a great expanse that is not narrow underneath. The way of the Rabbanah Shalom is not like the way of the people. Of course, friends, if you remember from Masechta Sanhedrin, a mesis, right? Ki yisischa achicha ben imecha. And he says, come, let's go do Avodah Zarah. Usually, when we talk about mesis in the context of humans, it's talking about being a bad influence, pulling somebody in to do some modna dikazach. V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, however, the Rabbanah Shalom is punkt fakert, mesis is ha'adam midarke misa darke chaim. He pulls a person away from death to life. Shenemar, as the Apostle says, va'ap asischa mi pitzar, that the Rabbanah Shalom lures you away, pulls you away from the narrow opening, migehenim shepiyat tzar she'eshnet tzover b'socha, from hell, that hell is a narrow opening, so that all of the smoke of hell could be trapped in there for all the hell people. Mishema Tomar, Kishem Shapiyat Kach Kula Tzara. Maybe we'll say, okay, well, just like it has a narrow opening, the hell is entirely narrow. It's not such a big place. Talmud Omer, Hemik Hirchiv. Did I read that correctly? Hemik Hirchiv, that when you go down, it becomes very wide and expansive. So yes, the opening to hell is narrow to trap in the smoke, but once you get in there, it's quite a big place for all the hell people. Maybe it's not for the melech. What's the melech? Rashi points out the pasuk in Mishlei, as a reference to Chochmah, says, Bi melachim yimlochu, with me, with wisdom. Melachim yimlochu, Talmidei Chachamim have wisdom, and they are in some way similar to kings. And therefore, maybe a king, maybe a Talmud Chacham who has strayed off the path will say that maybe hell is not for me. Talmud Omer Gam Hi LaMelech Huchan. It's also prepared for the kings. Mishem Tomar Ein Ba Eitzim. Maybe we say, okay, well, there's no fuel down there. The fires aren't firing. Talmud Omer Midurta Eish VeEitzim Arbe. There's a lot of fuel down there. Maybe we'll say, okay, well, this is the schar for limud haTorah, that I just won't go to hell. No, there's a lot more than that. Talmud Omar v'nachas shulchan chamole doshen, that you will have a big geshmaka table full of all sorts of geshmaka stuff. You learn Torah, you get geshmaka stuff. Givaldig. Let's learn Torah and let's get geshmaka stuff. The Mishnah had said that if Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, so if Yom Kippur is on Shabbos, so you can't eat the shtei lechem on Shabbos, you eat them on Motzei Shabbos. Now, if Yom Kippur is on a Friday, okay, if Yom Kippur falls out on a Friday, so we said that the korban chatas of the musaf, so it's a regular korban chatas, and the Kohanim eat the korban chatas. They're not going to eat it on Friday on Yom Kippur because it's a fast day, but on Friday night they can eat the korban chatas. The problem is, how are you going to cook it? It's Shabbos. The answer is, you're not going to cook it. But it says that the Babylonians, though, they just ate meat raw. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't actually the Babylonians who would eat that raw meat. They were from Alexandria in Egypt. But because the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael hated the Babylonians, therefore they just blamed the Babylonians for everything. Fact of the matter, it wasn't the Babylonians who ate raw meat, that was a sort of negative, kind of a barbaric kind of depiction. It wasn't actually the Babylonians, it was the Egyptians. But the rabbis in Israel just like to blame the Babylonians for everything. Tosfos Tosfos mentions a Gemara in Masechta Yoma on Daf Tes, where Reish Lakish expresses his dissatisfaction with whether it was Rabbi Babachana or Zeira for this part, right? At this part, because he was a Babylonian. Because the Babylonians, they did not come, right? They did not fully come back to Eretz Yisrael during the Second Temple. Many Babylonians remained in Babylonia, and for that reason, so Reish Lakish argued, for that reason, the Shechina did not fully come back to Eretz Yisrael during the Second Temple. Of course, during the Second Temple, there was no Nevuah. There was no, right, the Shechina did not fully come back, and says Reish Lakish, that's because many of the Yidden remained in Babylonia. So therefore, there was a particular frustration that the rabbis of Eretz Yisrael had with the Babylonians, like, why, you should have come back, and then we would have been able to have the Shechina in full. But nonetheless, there was still a little bit of Shechina, and that was the concept of a baskol, the echo from heavens. Although the Gemara says there that when Reish Lakish reported this dialogue to Rabbi Yochanan that he had, right? It says he was bathing in the river, and then he had this discussion with those Rabbi Babachana or Zeiri, that about this dialogue about how because the Babylonians didn't come back to Israel, therefore there's no Shechina. Rabbi Yochanan pointed out that the pasuk says Yaft Elohim liyafes v'yishkom halechem, that Yafes, Persia, comes from Yafes, and even though they built the second temple and that was all great, but the fact of the matter is the pasuk says v'yishkom halechem, that the Shechina was going to be sure only in a temple built by the Yidden, such as the Solomon's temple, the first temple, but it was foregone that there was not going to be Shechina in the second temple, because it was essentially initially kind of got it off the ground by the Persian Empire. Very, very interesting. Where are we? Yeah, there's some brisa. I'm looking for the keyword. It says like brisa. Okay, Tanya Namioch. Within the brisa, Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi lebavlim aim. It wasn't actually the Babylonians that were the meat eaters, the raw meat eaters. El Alexandrium aim. They were the Egyptians. Umitoch shasonin es bavlim. But because the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael had negative feelings towards the Babylonians for ruining the potential for Nevuah, so and Shechina Korin Osam Al Shem Bavlim, so they just blamed the raw meat eating on the Babylonians anyways. Omar lo Rabbi Yehuda, it says Rabbi Yehuda Tanuach Daitro she'inachta es daiti. Rabbi Yehuda says to Rabbi Yossi, wow, I appreciate that you gave that reflection, because my family comes from Babylonia, and while I guess Rabbi Yehuda probably wasn't super thrilled that the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael didn't like the Babylonians, but at least he was relieved that they did not have this trait, did not have this side to them where they just consumed lots of raw animals. I think that was considered a negative kind of trait. Tosfos says, well, the fact of the matter is, they were eating the korbanos. I mean, what's the alternative? What, just not to eat the korban? I mean, they were at least eating the korban, but still, Tosfos says, they were eating the korban in this case, but it was an indication that they just have habitually eat raw, uncooked meat, which I guess was considered not such a civilized thing to do. Friends, now we move on to a new Mishnah, and in the Gemara we will discuss Klei mikadesh shelo bizmano. Here we go. Says the Mishnah, Sider esa lechem b'Shabbos v'sabazichen la'acher Shabbos. Okay, so if the shtei halechem were placed on the shulchan on Shabbos, as they should be, but the frankincense was only placed on the shulchan the next day, on Sunday. And then came the next Shabbos 6 days later, and the frankincense were burned prematurely, because they can only be burned 7 days later. Pasul, so the burning of the frankincense, and I think therefore by association the shtei halechem, pasul, you can't eat it, everything's pasul there, and because the burning of the frankincense was not done properly, so you won't be chayiv for pigul. So if the frankincense were burned with machshavas chutz and kol chutz lezmano, that won't make it pigul, since it wasn't burned properly. The matir was not properly burned. Noser, nor will you be chayiv for a noser, chayiv kares for noser if the bread is eaten on Sunday, the tameh, and if you're a tameh when you eat it, none of these things will be chayiv since the whole thing is just simply kind of puzzle, and whatever regular halachas would normally apply to the lechem hapanim would not apply here, specifically pickle noser and tameh. Sidras halechem v'sabazichen b'shabos. Okay, the breads and the frankincense were properly placed on the table on Shabbos. Great. However, if I understand correctly, the bazichin were burned the next day. The next day, the bazichin were burned. Psula. Once again, the whole thing becomes pasul vein chayiv l'leim pigul noser v'tameh, and you're also not chayiv for pigul noser and tameh in the same way that you weren't a minute ago. Sidras halechem v'sabazichin la'achar Shabbos. If the lechem hapanim and the bazichin were only placed on the shulchan on Sunday, not on Shabbos, but the next day, and then the bazichin were, the frankincense was burned the following Shabbos, again, not enough time. It was only 6 days later. It needs to be on the shulchan for 7 days. Psula. So what should you do in this case? Wait 13 days to the subsequent Shabbos. Because even if the shtei lechem remain, even if the lechem hapanim, I hope I haven't been saying shtei lechem, we're talking about the lechem hapanim now. Even if the lechem hapanim remain on the shulchan for a long time, nish geferlich, it's okay. And therefore, so if the lechem I hope I haven't been saying shtei lechem. If I have, we're talking about lechem hapanim. If the lechem hapanim have been placed together with the bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday, so you will be unable to burn the frankincense and eat the showbread 6 days later on the upcoming Shabbos. What you do is you wait 13 days until the subsequent Shabbos, and then you can burn the frankincense and eat the showbreads, etc. on that subsequent Shabbos. Tnan Hasam. This is a Mishnah in Talmud. It's also a Mishnah in Masechta Yoma. We're going to quote it from Yoma because in Yoma there's more to it that we're going to be quoting here. I'm actually going to drink a shluck of water. 1 second. I ran out of tea. I got to get more tea. Hopefully I'll remember to do that today. Tonight also we learn in a Mishnah in Yoma, Amrloi ma memuna. Who's the memuna? So interestingly, Rashi Masechta Yoma, it says it's the Skan Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol, who would be Kohen Gadol if there's a psul with the acting Kohen Gadol. However, Rashi over here quotes a Mishnah in Masechta Shkalim, where it says that Moses' name, Matisya ben Shmuel, the first Mishnah in I believe the 5th parak of Masechta Shkalim says that Matisya ben Shmuel, he was in charge of the payasos. He was in charge of the lots, right? We're going to learn Masechta Talmud in, I don't know, maybe a year, I don't know. And we already learned about it in Masechta Yoma a long time ago, about how there were lotteries every morning in the Beis Hamikdash for who gets to do what. So he was the one in charge of the lottery, and it seems from Rashi here that this is the Memuna that he's talking about over here. Right? He says, Ukshehu Shoel. I'm reading Rashi, Emigia Zman Shchita. So if it's recent time, so it seems like we're talking about Matisya ben Shmuel, according to the parish of Rashi over here. So tonight also we learn in a Mishnah in Masechta Yoma, Amar Loi Ma Memuna, the Memuna, I guess, let's say Matisya ben Shmuel, says to them, Tzu'u, go up and see in Migiaz Man Shchita if it is yet time to shech the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. Okay, go up to a high location where you could get a good view of the sunrise and see if it is yet time to slaughter the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar. Migia, if the time has arrived, Haroy Omer Barkoi, he says Barkoi, yes, there is light. Matisya ben Shmuel Omer Heir Pnei Kol HaMizrach, then Matisya ben Shmuel would say, as the entire eastern horizon, is there light on the entire eastern horizon ad shebechevron until Chevron? V'omer hein, he says yes, the entire eastern horizon until Chevron has light. Why did they need to go up to such a high place in order to get a real good view? Shepam achas ola moira levana. Well, because one time the moon was particularly bright, or bright enough. Vidimu sheher mizrach, and they thought that it was already morning, that the eastern horizon, that the sun was already lighting up the east. Shachatu es hatamid, and that morning they slaughtered the korban tamid. Votziu lebeis hasreifa, and then unfortunately they had to do over, and they wasted that sheep, and therefore they, from that point on, they would always, to be safe, they would go up to a very high location where they can get a good sneaky peek and make sure that it was in fact morning. Now, once they would determine, on Yom Kippur, once they would determine that, okay, it's time to slaughter the korban tamid shel shachar, so where am I? Voridu kohen gadol lebeis hatfilah. So then the kohen gadol would go down to the mikvah before slaughtering the korban tamid shel shachar, because this is on Yom Kippur. All the avodah was done by the kohen gadol. Ze'aklal b'mikdash, and parenthetically, ze'aklal b'mikdash, that there was a rule in the Beis Hamikdash called ha-mesich es raglav ton tvila, that anybody who urinates, any kohen who urinates, would have to go to the mikvah before going back to work. V'chol mayim, and I think I got it backwards here. What's actually? No, I'm sorry. Anybody who defecates, Ta'un Tvila, would have to go to the mikvah b'chol mayim, but just for urinating, Ta'un Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim, you would have to wash your hands and feet. Tani Avud Rab Avin, Avud Rab Avin taught, Lo zo b'vad, this was not the only scenario where korbanos would have to be Yotze lebeis hasreifa, be burnt and unusable. Right? We had that example just a few minutes ago about when they slaughtered the korban tamid too early. Afilu ola sa'of, it was still nighttime. Afilu ola sa'of she'nimlika balayla, but also a bird ola, that the malika that was killed, fingernailed at night, also unusable. You just gotta burn it in the beis hasreifa. Umincha shenikmitza balayla, and also a korban mincha that the kometz was kometzed at night, also unusable. You just burn it, but not on the mizbeach. You just destroy it. Teitze leveis hasreifa, goes out to be burnt. Bishlama olas ha'of mishum delo efshir le'adura. I can understand why the olas ha'of would be unusable if it was malikad at night, because, okay, malikaing at night is wrong. You can't do it. And once a bird has been malikad, you can't unmalika it. By malikaing it, you killed it. Once it's killed, it can't be unkilled. It was done at the wrong time. It was done at night. It's unusable. I get it. It's too late. We messed up. Do over. But by the korban mincha, I have an idea. Okay, you kometzed it at night. Take the kometz, put it back with the rest of the flour, wait until the daylight, and re-kometz it. What's the big deal? So why are we saying that the korban is ruined? Can't, by a korban mincha, I would imagine you actually could fix it. Put it back. Do it over during the day. Hutani la vu mefarik la. Wait, what? Hutani la vu amar la. Avud Rab Avin asked the question, and he then answered his own question. He scratched his own itch. Klei sharis mikadeshin shelo bizmanan. Very, very interesting. And he says, well, a klei sharis could be mikadesh shelo bizmanan. That when you take the kometz from the mincha and then you put it into the kometz bowl, into a klei sharis, so it is going to be mikadesh, that kometz, and once that kometz is mikadeshed, it can't go back to the rest of the mincha. And even though it was at night, and even though I see he's quoting here the Gemara, does Rashi quote it, or just I think it may have just been the Mesoras Hashas, directs us to a Gemara in Masechta Megillah that I think it's a Mishnah, but then the Gemara explains that the kometz and the mincha need to be done during the day. They are things that cannot be done at night, and therefore, because the klei sharis is mikadesh afilu shelo bizmano, so even though it was at night, a time when you shouldn't be kometzing, so I can, on the one end you could say, well, it was at night, maybe the klei sharis shouldn't work. it was at night, the wrong time. No, a Klei Sharis is mikadesh even shelo b'zmano, and therefore the komets becomes unusable. Meisvei, we have a question called a karev bayom, kadosh bayom. So we have a brayso that says that anything that is offered during the day becomes kadosh during the day. Skip to the next slide. Balayla kadosh bein bayom bein balayla. Something that is offered during the day can become kadosh whether at day, whether at night. Called a karev bayom, kadosh bayom, bayom in balayla lo. So we had just said that something that is kadosh, that it's karev bayom, for example, the komets. So we said kadosh bayom. Where am I? Bayom. So we said, right? We had just said kol karev bayom, kadosh bayom. Something that's offered during the day, like the komets. The komets needs to be offered during the day. So it's kadosh bayom. Bayom, not balayla. So why is Reb Avin saying, Avud Reb Avin saying, that if you komets a mincha at night, well, the Klei Sharis is going to be mikadesh afilu shelo b'zmanim. We have a brayso that says that things that are offered during the day, like a komets, would only be mikadesh during the day, not at night. You should be able to redo it. You should say that it's not kadosh. Bayom in balayla lo. So the Gemara answers, enu kadosh li karev. No, what it means is that bayom, in order to be able to komets and burn that komets on the mizbeach, yeah, for that it would need to be komets during the day and not at night. But aval kadosh li posel. But by kometsing at night, it's kadosh, again, not to the extent that now you could burn it on the mizbech, but it is kadosh to the extent that it's too late. You can't fix it, it's puzzle. You did it at the wrong time, it's puzzle. Mosiv Reb Zera, but Reb Zera asks a question from our Mishnah. Here's the tie-in to our Mishnah. Sidras halechem besabazichin achar Shabbos. If the showbreads, the lechem hapanim, and the bazichin were placed on the shulchan on Sunday. And then the bazichin were burned. The frankincense was burned 6 days later on the upcoming Shabbos. Psula. So we say psula. Okay. You can't do that. I says, so what should you do? Wait 13 days and burn the frankincense 13 days later on the subsequent Shabbos. That is the advice. Because you can even leave it on the shulchan for a while. But and here's the question. Here is the question. It is that if we say that a Klei Sharis is mikadesh shelo b'zmanon. By the way, this also relates to my question the other day about being posel belina. Anyways, let's put that aside for a second. If we say that Klei Sharis is mikadesh shelo b'zmanon, so the Klei Sharis is being the shulchan, and if we're saying that it's mikadesh shelo b'zmanon, so when's b'zmanon? On Shabbos. But we're saying that the lechem hapanim and the frankincense were put on the shulchan not at the right time, not on Shabbos, but on Sunday. But if we say that Klei Sharis is mikadesh shelo b'zmanon, which means that putting the lechem hapanim and the bazichin on the shulchan on Sunday would be mikadesh, even though it's not the right time, but it would nonetheless be mikadesh. Well, if it's mikadesh, then the halacha should be that from the time that it becomes kadosh, you should have 7 days. Basically, the clock should start ticking. You have 7 days to be on the shulchan, and then you have to eat it. I guess on the 8th day, right? But if it's put on Shabbos, so then the next Shabbos would be the 8th day, right? If Shabbos is 1, so the next Shabbos is 8. Anyways, but the clock should start ticking, right? If we're saying that a Klei Sharis, which in this case is the shulchan, is mikadesh shelo b'zmanon, so it'll be mikadesh even on Shabbos, on Sunday. And if it's mikadesh on Sunday, well, now that the showbreads and the bazichin are on the shulchan and they are kadosh, well, then you're gonna have to eat them, right? Basically, you can't eat them on Shabbos because it's only been 7 days. Now, you're also not going to eat them on Sunday either. What's going to happen is, come Sunday night, they'll become posel belina, which, by the way, I answered my question the other day. I said, why would they become, what makes them posel belina? Based on this, it sounds like what makes them posel belina is that once they're put on the shulchan, based on this approach, you then basically have to eat it. You have to take them off of the table a week later and eat them that day. Now, when it's done on Shabbos, then all is good. But if it's done on Sunday, so what we're saying is that a week later on Sunday, time is going to run out and you're not going to eat the showbreads on Sunday. What's going to end up is Sunday night, they're just going to become pasul belino. Why are we saying that you'll burn the frankincense and eat the breads 13 days later on the following Shabbos? Shouldn't they have already been pasul belino Sunday night? You get the question? So if we're going to say that Klei is mikadesh afilu shelo b'zmanan, so the Klei the shulchan, shelo b'zmanan on Sunday should be mikadesh, which would mean the following Sunday night already, the lechem hapanim should be pasul. How could we suggest that essentially the frankincense could be burned, lechem hapanim could be eaten 13 days later, the following Shabbos? It should be pasul by then. So if we're going to say Klei is mikadesh shelo b'zmanan, we run into this problem. Very interesting question, right? If it enters your mind, like we're saying, Klei is mikadesh and shelo b'zmanan, that a Klei is mikadesh even shelo b'zmanan. So likdosh, well then, when the breads and the frankincense are put on the shulchan on Sunday, they should already become kadosh. V'lifsol, and a week later, the following Sunday night, they should already become pasul. 13 days later on Shabbos, you can't be burning the frankincense and eating the breads. They've already been pasul for 5-6 days already. Amar Rabba says, Rabba Mandika Moshe Shapika Moshe says, Rabba, good question, but Avur the Rabba Avin Nami Masnisa Ka'amar. But the fact of the matter is, Avur the Rabba Avin was quoting a brisa. This is not a joke either, right? We had learned Tani Avur the Rabba Avin. I'm backing up 20 lines. Lo zo bavad el afilu ola sov shemika balala umincha shikmus balala. Taste of the base of sefer. Avur the Rabba Avin was quoting a brisa that when a kometz is kometz that night, it becomes pasul, it can't be used. Which means that Klei, and the idea was Klei is mikadesh even at night, shelo b'zmanim. So on the one hand, we are saying from our Mishnah with the lechem hapanim and the frankincense being put on the shulchan on Sunday, that it must be that Klei are not mikadesh b'zmanim, shelo b'zmanim, and therefore they can be used 13 days later on Shabbos. And yet we also have to reconcile the fact that there's a brisa that says that when a kometz is kometz that night, you have to throw away the really burn, but not on the mizbeach, the mincha, because the Klei is mikadesh shelo b'zmanim. Answers the Gemara, kasaver laila ein mechusar zmanu. Zman. Hayamim mechusarin zman. Interesting answer. That placing the lechem hapanim and the baziche levona on the shulchan on Sunday is different than chapping a kometz, than kometzing a kometz of a mincha at night. Why are they different? Because Laila ein mechusar zman. Right? For example, what's today? Tuesday, I think? Yeah, I think today's a Tuesday. So, God willing, Mashiach said to come today, we could already bring a korban mincha today. Anyways, on a Tuesday, you could bring a korban mincha. Now, the night before is technically part of the day. Kilu. The thing is, you can't offer menachos at night. It's exeris akosov. I don't remember what the pasuk is. In the Gemara, Megillah, Daf Chaf and Bebeis, they quote the pasuk. But it's exeris akosov that kometzes can't be kometz that night. But technically, already Monday night was already today, right? And I could offer a korban mincha today. Today is a very appropriate day to offer korban mincha. I just have to wait till the daytime. But I jumped the gun, I did it at night. I'm assuming that we're talking about the night before. Because we were talking about before Amud HaShachar. Anyway, I'm going to assume that we're talking about the night before. It could be the same thing would apply the next night. But anyways, let's talk about the night before. So let's say on Monday night, I took a kometz. Technically, it's not really shelo b'zmano, right? Because it's, what do we say? Laila ein mechusar zman. It's technically not mechusar zman because Tuesday is a perfectly appropriate day to bring korban mincha, but you simply can't do it at night. So the Klei is going to be mikadesh in this case because it technically is Tuesday, and Tuesday is a fine day to offer a korban mincha. But you're also not allowed to do it at night. So it kind of, what happens is, it's mikadesh li pasel, but not li karev. And that's why you just have to burn it. However, when is the proper time for the shtei halechem? Shabbos. Putting the shtei halechem and the baziche levona on the shulchan on Sunday is not the right day. And since it's not the right day, so the shulchan is not going to be mikadesh when it's the completely wrong day. And that can explain why when it comes to the komets, you have to burn it off of the mizbeach. You can't use it. It's ruined. Because you did it technically, right? Laila lab mechusar zman, and it would be considered the proper time, but also the wrong time, and it becomes possible. However, putting the lechem hapanim and the bazichin on the shulchan on a Sunday, it's not going to be mikadesh, and therefore you can just wait until 13 days later, and right, because the upcoming Shabbos would only be 7 days, 6 days later, but wait till 13 days later, and then you can burn the frankincense then, and there's no issue of the shulchan having been mikadesh et shelo bisman. That doesn't apply there. So frag the Gemara. But what about kimati leile leilya devei shimshei likdush v'lifsol? Gemara asks a very interesting question. We're going to drink a shluck of water, and we'll look at the interesting question. The interesting question is that, okay, fine. So the lechem hapanim and the baziche levona were placed on the shulchan on Sunday, and we're saying, okay, Sunday is completely wrong, and therefore the shulchan is not mikadesh. Okay, same thing. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, also shulchan not mikadesh, completely wrong. But what about Friday night? You had already put the lechem hapanim and the baziche levona on the shulchan from Sunday, and now comes the first Friday night. I would think when Shabbos kicks in, right, we said, Laila lab mechusar zman. So already Friday night, I would say, that already now, Laila lab mechusar zman, and the shulchan should already be mikadesh, the lechem hapanim. Now normally the lechem hapanim is put on the shulchan the next day, which means that the clock starts ticking the next day. And therefore you have until the following Shabbos, and then you take them off in the following Shabbos afternoon, and you can eat them on Shabbos and that night. But in this case, since they were already on the table because of the fact that they were already there since Sunday, right? Again, normally the new shtei lechem would only come on Shabbos afternoon. Here, Friday night, they were already on the shulchan. We should say that the shulchan that first Friday night already should be mikadesh, which means that comes the subsequent Friday night, they should already become posel belina. That next Friday night, you wouldn't be able to burn the frankincense and eat the shtei lechem hapanim on the 13th day, the subsequent Shabbos. Very interesting question, right? Even though we're saying on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right, it was irrelevant. The shulchan wasn't mikadesh because it was completely the wrong day. But come Friday night already, we would say laila lab mechusar zman, and we should say that the shulchan Friday night should already be mikadesh the breads that are on it, and comes the subsequent Friday night, it will become posel belina. What do you guys think about that question? On my Rava b'shakadim v'silek, Rava says, well, he made sure that when the Shabbos came 6 days later, he had taken the breads off of the shulchan, so that that night they would not become kadosh, right? That they would not be on the shulchan comes Friday night. The only question that I wonder then is that means that Friday night there's no breads on the shulchan at all. We had seen even according to Rabbi Yossi, right? He said that what does it mean? Talmud, he says, shelo yalin shulchan below lechem, which is interesting because it sounds to me, like according to Rava, there won't be any bread on the shulchan that night. But anyways, even if you say no, the breads were left on the shulchan, even Friday night, and still on the 13th day, the subsequent Shabbos, you could still burn the frankincense in the afternoon, eat the shtei halechem. It's not a problem because kevan de sidro shelo k'mitzvaso naisek misha sidro akof. Since the lechem hapanim and the baziche levono were put on milichatchila, they were put on a completely wrong day, so therefore, even come Friday night, they're not going to become kadosh, and they are not going to become posel belina the next Shabbos, because since kind of they were put on the shulchan completely wrongly, the whole thing just remains wrong, and they don't become kadosh on Friday night. And I think I'd imagine that apparently though that wouldn't hinder the subsequent Shabbos to be able to burn the incense and burn the frankincense and eat the shtei halechem. And just to point out the funny coinkadink again, we just talked about a kof on daf kuf. Maybe it's like our little way of like celebrating the great, humongous milestone and achievement of reaching daf kuf of Masechta Menachos. And now for the final Mishnah and final section of today's daf. Shtei halechem ne'achalos ein pochis mishnayim v'lo yoser al shlosha ketzad nefos me'erev yom tov ne'achalos b'yom tov l'shnayim chol yom tov lios acher Shabbos ne'achalos l'shlosha. The shtei halechem is not baked on Shavuos. The shtei halechem, well, I confused the lechem hapanim with the shtei halechem all the time, but this time I didn't. I said the right thing. Shtei halechem. I'm just pointing out that when I said shtei halechem, I meant shtei halechem this time. Anyways, the shtei halechem that are offered on Shavuos, they are not baked on Shavuos. They are baked on Erev Shavuos. I believe this year, I think Shavuos is going to be on a Thursday. So therefore, God willing, we will be baking, not we, but who bakes the shtei halechem? Probably the Kohanim. We'll be baking the shtei halechem on a Wednesday. On Wednesday, in just a few weeks from now, the holy Kohanim. Again, Freds, do we have Kohanim here at Babble on Talmud, or we're all just like Yisraels and Levis and stuff? What do we got here? I'm a Yisrael. I'm just a regular Yisrael. Anyways, so we're gonna have Kohanim, I think Kohanim, baking the shtei halechem on Wednesday, on Erev Shavuos. Now, what if Shavuos, however, was on Sunday, which means that Erev Shavuos was Shabbos? So then we would be baking the shtei halechem on Friday. Okay? So for example, this year, the shtei halechem will not be eaten on the day that it's baked, but rather on the next day, on day 2. However, if Shavuos were to be on a Sunday, so then the shtei halechem would be baked on a Friday. So Friday would be day 1, Shabbos day 2, and then they would be eaten on Sunday on day 3. So says the Mishnah, shtei halechem ne'chalos ein pachas mishnayim v'lo yos al shlosha. That the shtei halechem are consumed never less than 2 days from their baking, meaning including the day that they're baked, on day 2. V'lo yoser al shlosha, and never further out than on day 3. Ketzad haso nefos me'erev yom tov. If they are baked on erev yom tov, nechalos b'yom tov l'shnayim, so then they're eaten on day 2 on yom tov. Chol yom tov lios acher Shabbos. If Shavuos falls out on a Sunday, so nechalos l'shlosha, they are baked on Friday, which means that they're only eaten on day 3. Lechem hapanim ein nechol pachas mitisha v'lo yoser al echad aser. The lechem hapanim are eaten no less than 9 and no more than 11 days, right? Because of course, the lechem hapanim are on the shulchan for a full week. So the lechem hapanim are not baked on Shabbos. Remember, we actually saw a machlokas whether they're baked on Shabbos or not. Right? They could be baked on Friday or on Shabbos. There's machlokas Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda, I think. Anyways, so says the Mishnah that the lechem hapanim are not baked on Shabbos. They're baked on Friday, which means that if Friday is day 1, and the next day is day 2 on Shabbos, a week later will be day 9. So at the minimum, the lechem hapanim are eaten on day 9. However, what if Friday is a Yom Tov? What if there's a Yom Tov falls out on a Friday? So you're not going to bake the lechem hapanim on Friday, so you bake them on Thursday. So it'll be eaten on Shabbos on day 10. And if Rosh Hashanah falls out before Shabbos, so you have a 3-day Yom Tov, you have Thursday, Friday, or Rosh Hashanah, followed by Shabbos, well then, the lechem hapanim would be baked on Wednesday, which means that 11 days later on Shabbos is when they would finally be consumed. Okay, so again, lechem hapanim einechol pachos mitisha. It's never eaten less than 9 days from when it's baked, which is of course why there was such a big miracle that they were still fresh 9 days later. V'liyosar acharoser, never more than 11 days later. Ketzad ne'ef, how so? Nefa me'erev Shabbos. So normally the lechem hapanim would be baked on Erev Shabbos. So nefa me'erev Shabbos, v'nechol b'Shabbos l'tisha, and then 9 days, on day 9, they'll be eaten on Shabbos. Chol Yom Tov lios Erev Shabbos, if Yom Tov was Erev Shabbos, nechol la'asara, they would be eaten on day 10. Shnei Yomim Tovim Rosh Hashanah, if Thursday, Friday were Rosh Hashanah, well then, nechol achad aser, they would be eaten the following Shabbos on day 11. Ve'enu doche lo es Shabbos v'los Yom Tov, baking the shtei halechem, baking the lechem hapanim is not doche Shabbos, nor is it doche Yom Tiv. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says Shimon ben Gamliel Reb Shimon ben Asgan doiches Yom Tiv. No, they can actually be doche Yom Tiv, and therefore the shtei lechem you would bake the shtei lechem on Shavuos. The lechem hapanim, if Friday was a Yom Tiv, you would bake the shtei lechem on Friday. If Friday, because the shtei lechem, if Friday was a Yom Tiv, it wouldn't be doche Shabbos, but it would be on Friday. Friday was a Yom Tiv. You would bake the lechem hapanim on Friday. Ve'eno doche as Yom Tzom, but it would not be doche Yom Kippur. Right, baking the lechem hapanim, if Friday was Yom Kippur, baking the lechem hapanim would not be doche Yom Kippur. Okay, valdik. So you do it on Erev Yom Kippur. Says the Gemara, Ravina says, Ravina, the Divrei Omer Nidar Mu Nidavos ain't craving b'Yom Tiv. Let me drink a stick of water and we'll wrap up over here. So there's a shaila. Can Nidar Mu Nidavos be offered on Yom Tiv? Right, the Shalosh Regalim, right, let's say Shavuos, we'll make all sorts of naders and nidavas, and we'll say, let's all, on Shavuos, let us offer our neders and nidavas. So, according to the opinion, it says, no, you can't offer neders and nidavas in Yom Tov. So the shaila is, why not? One way to say it's because it's also midoraisa, you're not allowed to. That's one option. The other option is that, no, midoraisa, you can offer nedarim and nidavas on Yom Tov. However, the rabbis don't want you doing that because they don't want you. What are you going to say? You're going to say, I just made a neder, right? What's it now? It's several weeks before Shavuos. Hopefully, by the time Shavuos comes, we'll already have a Beis Hamikdash for a long time already. And now I'm going to make a neder and a dove, and I'll say, you know what? Why should I go to the Beis Hamikdash now and offer it? I'm going anyways on Shavuos. I'll offer it on Shavuos, on the Yom Tov of Shavuos, which means that you're basically saving your offering of korbanos, which involves shchita and melacha. So midoraisa, yes, it can be though, but we don't want a situation where people are davka saving their korbanos that I'll just offer them on Yom Tov. We would prefer that you offer them milchatchila, not on Yom Tov. So those are two perspectives. So Amar Ravina, the divrei ha'omer, one is that it's also midoraisa, the other is also midoraban. So Amar Ravina, the divrei ha'omer, nedarim and nedavos ain't craving by Yom Tov. According to the opinion who says that neders and nedavos are not offered on Yom Tov, lo tema midoraisa mechza chazu v'abanu degazu shlo yashe. Don't say that midoraisa you can offer nedarim and nedavos on Yom Tov, just that the rabbis said not to, because they're concerned that otherwise people are just going to wait to offer their korbanos on Yom Tov. Alternatively, Rashi says, alternatively you will delay bringing your korbanos, and you'll be over on bal ta'acher. You don't want to. There's a I think it was a machlekes in the Gemara in Beitza. I think maybe we assume that Bal Ta'acher is basically don't wait more than 3 regalim, but basically we don't want you to have a scenario where either you're waiting to dafka do it on Yom Tiv, or waiting in general. Anyways, don't say that that's the reason. Don't say that midoraisa you can offer these korbanos, but the rabbi said not to. Ela midoraisa nami lo chazu. Rather, no. According to the opinion that nedarim and nedavos cannot be offered on Yom Tov, it's because it's aser mi de oraisa. How do we know? Well, the shtei halechem the chovas hayomu. Because if we look at the shtei halechem, which is a chovas hayom, it's an obligation to offer it on, right? It's not just a neder and nedav, it's an obligation to offer it on Yom Tov, on Shavuos. And there's no issue of Shema Yasha, there's no neder that we're going to know. There's a mitzvah to offer the shtei lechem on Shavuos. We offer it on Shavuos, and yet it is not, at least according to the Tanakama, it's not doche Shabbos. V'katani eno doche lo es a Shabbos lo es a Yom Tov. It's not doche Shabbos, nor is it even doche Yom Tov according to the Tanakama. And therefore, from the fact that the shtei lechem are not doche Yom Tov or Shabbos or Yom Tov, there's no gezerah. It's not like, well, midoraisa, it can be doche Yom Tov, but the rabbis are concerned about Shema Yasha. There's no Shema Yasha when it comes to the shtei lechem. And the shtei lechem, you can't bake on you cannot bake on Yom Tov according to Tanakama. You don't bake it on Shavuos. Therefore, it must be that the iser of preparing the shtei lechem is midoraisa, which is why it's not doche Yom Tov. And the same would apply to nedarim and nedavos, that the iser is midoraisa, not to offer nedarim and nedavos. Hadrin alach shtei lechem. We'll come back to Perek shtei, halechem. Wow, what a parak. That was a super intense parak. We had lots of visuals, but very interesting as well. I think I learned a lot in this parak. What do you guys think? How was it? You learned a lot in this parak? How things worked in the Beis HaMikdash and the Shulchan and the Aron and where things were configured. Lots of interesting stuff in this parak. Friends, on Daf 100 on Daf Kuf of Masechta Menachos is also a fascinating Daf. We learned all about Vagisa bo Yomam v'Layla. We saw different perspectives on what Talmud means. Right? We saw the perspective of Tanakama for Talmud, at least when it comes to lechem hapanim, was that they always have to be on the shulchan. But we saw the shita of Rabbi Yossi, who says even a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night is sufficient. And Rabbi Ami said, well, based on that, maybe we'll say lo yomu sefer Torah zemipicha v'agizu yomam v'layla could just mean a little bit during the morning, a little bit at night. And Reb Shimon ben Yochai Taka says just that. Even Kriyas Shema in the morning and Kriyas Shema at the night is sufficient. But Reb Yochanan and Reb Shimon Yochai said, but we don't want Amei Aretz to know this because then they're only going to say Kriyas Shema and nothing else. Rav Taka said that no, fakert, you could say, you use that as opportunity for inspiration, that even though all you need to do is learn a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night, still people are learning so much more, and it serves as an inspiration. We saw the Gemara had said that you should not view learning as a chova, as an obligation that you can make yourself pater for. We saw three pshats on that. Rashi had said that it means that don't view it like a chov, like a debt, that you just need to pay your debt and get it over with. Don't view it like that. View it like something that you want to do. We saw Tosfos gave two interesting approaches also, which means don't view it like, I need to just learn all day. It's a chova, I need to just learn all day. I can't work, I can't do anything else, I just need to learn. No. Yofet Talmud Torah im derech eretz. And also another perspective was don't be overwhelmed by the vast amounts of Torah that how am I going to get to every last lechem locha legmor v'lo benata lo ata ben chorin li pater mimenu. Rather let's learn together Babble on Talmud, a daf a day, and before you know it, we've learned all of Shas. Friends, Klei sharis mikadesh shelo b'zmanu, very interesting discussion there. I think where we kind of landed was that right, we said that, for example, Laila, what did we say? Laila lab mechusar zman, right? As opposed to, so we had kind of two scenarios. One is where you have a korban mincha that you're supposed to bring during the day and you brought it at night. But technically it's not really, right? You could bring it that day, but you brought it the night before, so the Klei sharis with mikadesh li pasal but not li karev. Okay, they'll be kind of stuck in the middle, the whole thing's possible. But when you put the shtei halechem and the baziche levona on the shulchan, on completely, did I say shtei lechem? When you put the lechem hapanim and the baziche levona on the shulchan on completely the wrong day, well then the shulchan will not be mikadesh. We got into a very interesting discussion about then won't it be mikadesh that Friday night, or the first Friday night when it's already right laila lab b'chusar zman. So Rav had said yes, but what you'll have to do is you have to take the lechem hapanim off the shulchan before Friday night. I think it was Marzuchin of Ashi had said that since you completely got it wrong on the wrong day, it's not going to be mikadesh at all. It's like a monkey put it there. It's not going to make a difference. And finally, when to bake the shtei halechem and lechem hapanim. So according to the Tanakama, not on Shabbos, not on Yom Tiv. According to Reb Shimon Gamliel, you can bake the shtei halechem and lechem hapanim on Shabbos, but you would be unable to bake on. Wait, what? No. Reb Shimon Gamliel says that you can bake on Yom Tiv, not on Shabbos, but on Yom Tiv, but not on Yom Kippur. Obviously, that wouldn't apply to the shtei halechem, but it would apply to the lechem hapanim. Friends, that was the kuf of Masechta Menachos. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day, and I will catch you tomorrow on Yom Ha'atzmaut.